It was a cold November morning in 2016 in Birmingham, England. The city was just beginning to stir, with people rushing to work, packed in thick coats against the chill. In a quiet, forgotten corner of a landfill, a small figure moved cautiously. It was Slowly, a stray cat known to the locals for his gentle nature and unusually slow, thoughtful movements. Slowly had no home, but he had a sharp instinct for survival. That morning, as he wandered through the trash in search of food, his ears caught a faint, unfamiliar sound, a soft whimper, barely audible beneath the rustling of the wind. His nose twitched, picking up a scent that was neither food nor familiar. Guided by something deeper than curiosity, Slowly approached a battered cardboard box, half buried among discarded newspapers and broken bottles. Inside, wrapped in a thin, dirty cloth, was a newborn baby. The infant's tiny fists trembled against the cold, its weak cries barely strong enough to pierce the morning air. Slowly stood still, his green eyes fixed on the fragile life before him. For a moment, the world seemed to pause. Then, as if understanding the urgency of the situation, Slowly did the only thing he could. He started meowing. At first, his cries blended into the background noise of the city, but Slowly was persistent. He circled the box, pawing at it gently, his meows growing louder and more desperate. Passers-by, used to ignoring stray animals, finally took notice. A woman walking her dog hesitated, then turned towards the source of the sound. When she saw the cat, tail flicking anxiously beside the box, she stepped closer. What she saw made her gasp. Without hesitation, she called for help. Within minutes, paramedics and police officers arrived. The baby, weak but alive, was rushed to the hospital. The doctors later confirmed that if the child had been left out for much longer, the cold could have taken its life. News of the miraculous rescue spread quickly, and Slowly became an unexpected hero. The once overlooked stray was now celebrated as the cat who refused to ignore a life in need. Local shelters offered to take him in, and soon, Slowly found himself not only with a name that the whole city knew but also with a warm home and a family that loved him. The baby, later adopted by a kind family, grew up healthy and happy. And though he would never remember the night he was abandoned, his life was forever tied to the small, unassuming cat who had stopped, listened, and refused to walk away. Some say animals don't understand human emotions, but Slowly proved otherwise. His act of compassion and determination reminded everyone that sometimes, the smallest heroes have the biggest hearts. On the outskirts of town, in a quiet alley, along a long fence, wandered a tiny kitten named Ash, next to his best friend, a scruffy puppy named Rusty. The two were inseparable. Something was wrong that morning. Rusty lay still, his small chest barely rising. His usual playful cries quieted. Ash nudged him with a paw, then buried his nose in Rusty's damp fur. Nothing. Panic gripped the kitten's heart, his wide amber eyes darting, his whiskers trembling with fear. Ash jumped onto Rusty's side, his small weight sinking into the puppy's tangled fur. "Wake up!" He seemed to scream, a sharp, desperate meow that echoed across the wasteland. He meowed again, louder, his voice breaking with worry. But Rusty didn't move. Ash's tail twitched, his fear turning to determination. He couldn't lose his friend, not like this. With one last look at Rusty, the kitten took off, his tiny paws kicking up dust as he raced toward the street. And then he saw her, the girl doctor who often helped homeless animals, her face kind and caring. Ash ran up to her, meowing to get her attention. The girl stopped then, seeing the kitten, dropped to her knees. "What's wrong, little one?" she asked, stroking his head. Still meowing, the kitten ran back toward the wasteland, looking back to make sure the girl was following him. She realized something was wrong and hurried after him. When they reached Rusty, the girl gasped, "Oh, poor thing." She knelt down next to the puppy, her hands moving quickly, checking his pulse, pressing gently on his chest. Ash stood next to her, his heart pounding as he watched her. Worked out the minutes stretched into an eternity. But then Rusty stirred. He let out a small whimper, and Ash froze, his ears perking up. The doctor smiled, wiping a tear from her cheek. "You're a brave little hero, aren't you?" she said, Looking at Ash with a mixture of awe and amusement, she pulled a bottle of water and some food from her bag, coaxing Rusty to drink and bite while Ash snuggled against her, purring in relief. Later, carrying both animals in her arms, she carried them to the nearest shelter. "You two stick together," she whispered as she handed them over, still amazed at the kitten who had helped save his friend's life. And isn't that what really matters? In this vast world, full of challenges and uncertainty, the strongest connection we can have is the one we share with those we care about. It's through love, loyalty, and support that we find our true strength. Ash and Rusty's story reminds us that even in the darkest of times, companionship and friendship can light the way. So, let's not forget to cherish those bonds, because they are what make life truly meaningful. If you enjoyed this heartwarming tale and want to discover more touching stories like this, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, leave a comment below sharing your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel. You wouldn't want to miss out on more incredible stories and hidden gems. Would you join us and be part of our community? In the scorching expanses of Africa, where the relentless sun scorches the earth and the endless savannas hide dangers and wild predators, a story full of unexpected compassion took place. It was a day that would forever change the life of a little girl trapped in cruelty and despair. The girl was only 12 years old, and on that day, her life was torn apart on the very threshold of adolescent joy. She was kidnapped, destined to become a commodity for marriage to one of those who had taken her from her home. The land was unforgiving, torn from her loved ones. The girl found herself in the heart of a desolate world where violence and fear became her only companions. Few can imagine what it feels like to be held captive, without strength, without the means to fight, and without hope of rescue. Day after day, under the scorching sun, the girl sat, weeping bitterly, not knowing what to do. The silence, broken only by her own sobs, seemed merciless. And then, on the horizon, they appeared three powerful lions, predators of whom terrifying stories are told since childhood. Their presence was sudden, but entirely inexplicable. Instead of attacking, as one would expect from such animals, they stopped beside the girl. Their eyes glistened in the heat, and their fierce roars drove away the kidnappers, as if they were nothing more than small mice rather than men. The lions surrounded the girl, not allowing anyone to approach who sought to harm her. Without launching any attacks, they protected her nonetheless. It was a true miracle. Wild beasts, whose nature demands predatory cruelty, stood on the side of the one who was helpless in this cruel world. Their powerful bodies and menacing roars became a reliable shield against those ready to inflict pain. Time passed, and only when rescuers arrived at police who found the girl did the lions, as if understanding that her salvation was near, disappear into the savanna's thickets. They left the girl without causing her any harm. All they left behind was a sense of safety and gratitude that would live in the girl's heart forever. The extraordinary story of the lion's kindness was seen by many as an incredible act of mercy in a world where violence and cruelty sometimes become the norm. It reminded us all that even in the darkest corners of the world, there can be bright moments where kindness prevails. The girl returned home, but that event could never be forgotten. Her heart was filled with gratitude, and her mind with wonder at how something as wild as lions could become a symbol of hope and salvation. Perhaps there are no laws of nature so cruel that they could completely erase kindness, even in the most unexpected of its bearers. In the heart of a dense forest, where nature reigns in its pristine beauty, an unusual story unfolded that would change one man's life forever. This is a tale of how the wild can show unexpected mercy and how even the fiercest predators can become unwitting saviors. One cold autumn night, a hunter named Ivan got lost in the dense forest. He was an experienced tracker, but even his skills could not help when a thick fog fell on the ground, hiding all landmarks. Ivan realized that he was lost and tried to find his way back, but in vain. The night was near, and with it came the fear of the unknown. Suddenly, in the silence of the forest, Ivan heard an ominous howl. The wolves, sensing his presence, began to surround him. Their eyes glowed in the darkness, and Ivan realized that he could not cope with the entire pack alone. He prepared for the worst, but suddenly something unexpected happened. A huge bear emerged from the forest thicket. Its powerful body and terrifying roar forced the wolves to retreat. The bear seemed to ignore Ivan, but his presence scared the wolves. Sensing danger, they quickly retreated, leaving the hunter alone with a new, but no less formidable neighbor. Ivan froze, not knowing what to do. The bear, however, did not show aggression. It simply stood there, as if guarding the territory. Ivan decided to take advantage of the moment and slowly began to retreat, keeping his eyes on the bear. To his surprise, the bear did not follow him. Instead, it remained in place, as if letting Ivan know that he could leave. This story became a legend in those parts. People began to respect bears and understand that even the most dangerous predators can show unexpected mercy. Ivan, on returning home, never picked up a gun again, preferring to enjoy the beauty of nature without harming it. So, in the depths of the forest, where nature dictates its own laws, a story about a bear and wolves unfolded, reminding people of the importance of respect for wildlife and its inhabitants. Deep in the heart of the Amazon rainforest, where the air was thick with humidity and the sounds of the jungle never ceased, a soldier named Daniel trudged through the dense foliage. He was part of a reconnaissance unit, but after an ambush by enemy forces, he found himself alone, wounded, and lost. His radio was broken, and his supplies were dwindling. As he pushed through the undergrowth, he heard a low, pained hiss. Instinctively raising his rifle, he scanned the area and soon spotted the source, a massive green anaconda, trapped under a fallen tree branch. The snake's powerful body written weakly, unable to free itself, Daniel hesitated. He knew these creatures could be deadly, but something in its dark, intelligent eyes made him pause. Despite his exhaustion, he approached cautiously. Using all his strength, he lifted the heavy branch just enough for the snake to slither free. For a moment, it remained still, staring at him as if memorizing his face. Then, without a sound, it disappeared into the thick jungle. Days passed, and Daniel's situation grew dire. His wound festered, fever clouded his mind, and he stumbled through the wilderness, barely conscious. One evening, as he collapsed near a riverbank, the jungle suddenly fell silent, a sign of danger. Through his hazy vision, he saw movement in the shadows, jaguars, 3 of them, their golden eyes locked onto their vulnerable prey. Daniel's fingers trembled as he reached for his knife, knowing it wouldn't be enough. He braced himself for the attack when suddenly, a massive shape emerged from the darkness. It was the anaconda. With lightning speed, it lunged at the nearest jaguar, coiling its powerful body around the predator. The other 2 cats hesitated, then fled into the jungle. Daniel watched, barely able to comprehend what was happening, as the snake squeezed until the jaguar went limp. Then, just as silently as before, the anaconda slithered away. As dawn broke, a rescue team finally found Daniel, weak but alive. He never told anyone about the anaconda. But deep in his heart, he knew he had saved the snake's life, and in return, it had saved his ... If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe for more heartwarming tales about the incredible bond between animals and humans.
A story that will be told in that village for years to come. This story happened deep in the heart of Siberia, where the forests are so thick that sunlight barely breaks through the canopy. A man named Nikolai, an old gamekeeper, lived at the very edge of the woods. He knew every trail and path like the back of his hand, had seen bears and wolves, but one day he encountered something even his years of experience couldn't explain. It was early spring, when the snow had mostly melted, but the nights still held a bitter chill. Nikolai was in his cabin, repairing a broken ski, when he heard a sound outside, quiet, strained, like something was calling for help. He grabbed his flashlight and stepped out onto the porch, and froze. Standing at the edge of the yard was a lynx. Not wild-eyed or angry, like animals often are when they feel threatened. No, she was limping slightly and staring straight at him. In her eyes there was no rage, only worry. And something else Nikolai would later describe with one word: pleading. He considered scaring her off with a shout, But the lynx didn't move. She simply turned, looked back once more, and began walking toward the forest, glancing over her shoulder, almost as if asking him to follow. Something inside told him he should. He didn't take his rifle, just his headlamp and some sturdy gloves. The trail led deeper and deeper into the woods, through fallen trees and across small ravines, to places Nikolai hadn't visited in years. And finally, at the edge of a mossy slope, he saw why the lynx had come. Down in a small hollow, tangled in the roots of a fallen fir, a lynx cub was whimpering tiny, with a swollen paw, trapped between stones. It was clear the little one couldn't free itself. Without hesitation, Nikolai climbed down, carefully pulled the cub out, wrapped it in his jacket, and climbed back up. The mother lynx had waited, silent, watching. When he reached the top, she approached, slowly, gracefully. He didn't move, just waited. Then, gently, the lynx licked her cub and looked up at him, tilting her head slightly, as if to say, "Thank you." And then she disappeared into the darkness. Nikolai brought the cub home, nursed it back to health, and after a month, returned it to the forest. When he released the little lynx, he saw her again, standing between the trees. She didn't come closer, just watched. And when the cub ran to her, Nikolai let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. From that moment on, he saw the forest differently, not just as a place for hunting, but as a place of neighbors. Even the fiercest creatures, he learned, could love, and when the time comes, they can ask for help.
In a remote Alaskan village, nestled at the edge of a vast snow-dusted wilderness, there lived an elderly woman named Agnes. She was alone, her family long gone, buried beneath the frozen earth years ago. Agnes kept a modest homestead, chickens, a small garden in the summer, and a sturdy cabin she'd inherited from her parents. She lived off a meager pension, her days quiet and solitary. Humans have long welcomed animals into their lives for companionship and protection. But sometimes, it's the wild creatures that unexpectedly become their truest allies. One crisp autumn day, a group of weary hunters trudged past her cabin. In these isolated parts, it was custom to offer strangers a warm drink or a place to rest, no questions asked, often for a small tael or coin in return. The men, exhausted from days in the forest, knocked on Agnes' door, the last house before the wild took over. They carried with them a modest haul from their hunt, including 3 tiny wolf pups, orphaned after their mother had met her end. The hunters stayed the night, sipping tea by Agnes' fire. And when dawn broke, they each took a pup, leaving the smallest and weakest one behind on her porch as they set off. The little creature, shivering in the morning frost, looked more like a lost mutt than a fierce predator. Agnes, peering out her window, assumed some village child had abandoned a stray. She waited for an owner to claim it, but no one came, so the pup stayed. Wolves in these parts weren't massive beasts, and feeding it proved no harder than sustaining a regular yard dog. She named him Whisper, for he didn't bark, rarely growled low, or let out more than a soft, eerie howl now and then. Whisper grew up fast. In summer, he roamed her yard, chasing after her chickens when she wasn't looking, though he'd slink back with a guilty droop of his ears if she caught him mid-mischief. He adored Agnes, obeying her gentle commands. And in winter, he'd curl up inside by the hearth, his thick fur a comfort against the biting cold. Despite his wild blood, he was her shadow, her quiet guardian. Then whispers began to ripple through the village. Escaped convicts were prowling the nearby taiga, desperate and dangerous. Doors were bolted, windows barred, but Agnes, living on the outskirts, either didn't hear the rumors or paid them no mind. One stormy evening, as snow swirled outside, a sharp knock rattled her door. Trusting and unworldly, she opened it to 3 ragged men, strangers with hard eyes. They'd come scavenging for food, clothes, anything to keep them going, and they figured an old woman alone wouldn't put up a fight. They planned to leave no trace, but they hadn't counted on Whisper. He'd been dozing in the corner, and noticed until the tension snapped him awake. Now he was no longer the playful pup, but a full-grown wolf, hackles raised, teeth bared in a snarl that vibrated through the cabin. He planted himself between Agnes and the intruders, a wall of fur and fury. One of the men panicked, pulled a knife, and lunged, slicing Whisper's flank. The wolf yelped but didn't falter. Instead, he leapt, jaws snapping, eyes wild with primal rage. The men froze, realizing they faced not a pet, but a beast forged by the wilderness. They bolted, stumbling into the night. Their escape was short-lived. The village dogs, aroused by the commotion, erupted into a cacophony of howls and barks, alerting the townsfolk. Men poured from their homes, armed with rifles, axes, and whatever else they could grab. 3 weakened fugitives stood no chance against a mob of rugged Alaskans fueled by anger and protectiveness. The convicts were cornered like prey, hauled off by the authorities who arrived soon after. Whisper survived his wound, though he limped for a while. From then on, he grew warier, his amber eyes tracking every shadow that crossed Agnes' land. But with her, he remained tender, loyal to Wild Heart, bound to the old woman who'd taken him in. Together they weathered the seasons, an unlikely pair, proving that even in the harshest places, friendship can bloom where it's least expected. On a crisp September morning, golden rays pierced the icy waters of a serene coastal bay near Vancouver. Laura Jones, a seasoned diver with more than 10 years of exploring the ocean depths, had captured countless images of underwater wonders. But she never dreamed this dive would leave a mark on her life forever. The water was a bracing 10 degrees Celsius, yet the clarity was stunning. Visibility stretched nearly 25 meters. Laura glided through the gentle currents, her camera trained on a cluster of colorful anemones swaying on the ocean floor. A pair of tiny crabs caught her eye, and she adjusted her lens for a closer shot. Suddenly, she felt a faint ripple in the water, a sign something big was nearby. Thinking it might be a playful sea lion, Laura turned slowly. To her shock, a young humpback whale, barely 3 meters long, swam just a few meters from her. Its movements were odd, almost nervous, and its large, soulful eyes seemed to carry a desperate message. Laura's pulse raced as she snapped a few photos of the rare visitor. The calf lingered, circling her with purpose. Then it began to swim away, pausing often to glance back, as if urging Laura to follow. Hesitant but intrigued, she decided to trust her gut. Securing her gear, she trailed the young whale into deeper waters. After swimming nearly 400 meters, they reached a deep underwater ravine. Laura's heart skipped a beat at the sight before her. An enormous adult humpback whale, likely the calf's mother, lay still, her massive body covered in a thick crust of barnacles. Only faint patches of skin near her eyes and breathing hole were visible. The calf nudged its mother gently, but there was no response. Laura pulled out her small diving knife and, with steady hands, began scraping away the barnacles. It was slow, delicate work. She cleared only a small area in 20 minutes before her air supply dwindled. Surfacing quickly, she called for backup on her radio, her voice trembling with urgency. A nearby marine rescue team responded promptly, arriving within 40 minutes with specialized tools. The team brought hydraulic tools to remove the barnacles and medical supplies to examine the whale. A scan revealed a deadly problem, a tangled mass of fishing gear in the whale's stomach, releasing toxic substances. Without help, the whale wouldn't have survived the week. Using floating supports, the rescuers moved the weakened whale to a rehabilitation facility. Over the next month, the mother whale regained her strength, her calf never leaving her side. Laura visited often, helping the team and documenting their recovery. When the duo was finally released, they leapt together in a graceful display before vanishing into the horizon. A silent thank you. Their story spread worldwide, shining a light on the remarkable intelligence of humpback whales and the dangers of ocean pollution. Laura kept tabs on them through a tracking system, grateful for the chance to witness the power of a calf's determination and a mother's survival. The morning of August 30, 2007, promised to be perfect. The sun had just risen above the horizon, painting the waters of the Pacific Ocean in shades of gold and pink. Todd Endress, a 24-year-old surfer with fiery eyes and salt-streaked hair, stood on the shore of Marina State Beach in California. His board tucked under his arm gleamed with morning dew, and the waves beckoned, whispering, "Today is your day." He had no idea that within an hour, his life would hang by a thread and that salvation would come from the depths. Todd leapt onto his board and paddled toward the horizon, where the waves rose like the breath of a living beast. The water was cool, but his heart beat to the rhythm of freedom. He caught the first wave, then the second, adrenaline surging through his veins. Everything was going as usual until a dull thud jolted him. At first, he didn't understand what had happened. His board lurched, and his feet suddenly lost their grip. Todd turned and froze. A dark shadow emerged from the water, just a meter away. A shark, a great white, nearly 5 meters long, with black eyes as empty as the abyss. Its jaws snapped, and in the next instant, razor-sharp teeth sank into his left leg. Pain seared through him like a red-hot blade, and the water around him turned crimson. "No!" he shouted, but his voice drowned in the roar of the waves. The shark yanked him downward, and Todd swung his fist at its nose, the only thing he could think to do. It let go, but only for a moment. The second strike came at his back, teeth tore through his skin down to his ribs, exposing bone. Blood gushed, mixing with the salt water, and the world began to blur before his eyes. He knew this was the end. But then, something inexplicable happened. The water around him churned, and shadows rose from the depths, not one, but dozens. Dolphins. Their sleek bodies glinted in the sunlight, and their piercing cries cut through the air. Todd, gasping in agony, watched as they surrounded him in a tight ring, at least a dozen, maybe more. They weren't just swimming nearby. The dolphins slapped their tails against the water, flapped their fins, creating a chaos of splashes and sounds. The shark lunged at him again, but one dolphin darted forward, ramming its nose into the predator's side. The beast recoiled, stunned. Todd clung to his board, his strength fading. Blood flowed like a river, and the shore seemed impossibly far. But the dolphins didn't relent. They held their formation, like soldiers guarding their own. Their movements were coordinated, almost intelligent. They kept the shark at bay, giving him a chance, and he realized this was his only hope. Gathering the last of his will, Todd lay flat on his board and began paddling toward shore, the dolphins swimming alongside, refusing to let the shark near. When his hand finally touched sand, he could barely breathe. Friends who had spotted the trouble from the beach rushed over, pulled him from the water, and called for help. A medevac helicopter whisked Todd to the hospital, where doctors fought to save his life. They later told him, "You should have died out there in the water. It's a miracle you're here." But Todd knew it wasn't just a miracle, it was the dolphins. Lying in his hospital bed, his back and legs swathed in bandages, he gazed out the window at the distant ocean. Somewhere out there, in the depths, his rescuers glided through the waves, asking for neither glory nor thanks. He would never know why they came. But he would tell this story again and again about the day the dolphins stood between him and death, granting him a second chance. This is a gripping, true story of instinct, courage, and quick action that saved a child's life and demonstrates the unbreakable bond between a pet and its family. A family moved into their new home, bringing along their loyal pet, a Doberman named Khan. The family included a little girl, just 17 months old, who was their pride and joy. On that fateful day, the toddler was playing in the backyard of their new residence. Her parents, confident in the safety of their fenced-in yard, allowed her to enjoy some outdoor time under the watchful eye of Khan, their trusted guard dog. They had no reason to suspect that danger was lurking nearby. As the little girl giggled and toddled around, Khan stayed close, his protective instincts always on alert. Suddenly, the large Doberman let out a low, menacing growl. Something in the grass had caught his attention, a subtle rustling that signaled trouble. Peering closer, it became clear a king brown snake, one of Australia's most venomous species, was coiled in the grass, dangerously close to the unsuspecting child. The snake's presence was a silent threat, its earthy brown scales blending seamlessly with the surroundings. Without hesitation, Khan sprang into action. His first move was to nudge the girl away from the snake, using his body to shield her from the creeping danger. But the snake, sensing movement, began to slither closer, its intentions unclear, but its proximity alarming. Khan didn't falter. In a split-second decision, he seized the baby's diaper with his teeth, a makeshift handle, and yanked her away, tossing her roughly a meter out of harm's way. The sudden, forceful motion startled the snake, and its predatory instincts kicked in. Enraged by the disturbance, it lunged at Khan, sinking its fangs into his paw. The commotion caught the attention of the adults inside the house. Hearing Khan's barks and the child's startled cries, they rushed to the backyard. What they found was a chaotic scene. Their daughter sprawled safely in the grass, Khan standing his ground, and the snake locked in a deadly confrontation with their brave dog. Acting quickly, the parents intervened. One of them managed to subdue and kill the snake, likely with a shovel or another tool, while the other scooped up their shaken but unharmed daughter. Khan, however, was not out of danger yet. The king brown snake's venom is a potent cocktail of neurotoxins and coagulants, and the bite to his paw had already begun to take its toll. His breathing grew labored, and his strength started to wane. Fortunately, the family didn't waste a moment. They rushed Khan to a nearby veterinarian, where he received immediate medical attention, likely including antivenom and supportive care. Thanks to their swift response and the expertise of the vet, Khan pulled through, defying the odds of a venomous snakebite. This heart-pounding incident left the family in awe of their Doberman's courage and quick thinking. What could have been a tragic loss turned into a story of survival and loyalty. The little girl, oblivious to the gravity of the situation, was safe and sound. Khan, now recovering, has cemented his place as the family's hero guardian who risked his life to protect the smallest member of his pack. For the parents, it was a stark reminder of the unpredictable dangers that can hide even in a seemingly safe new home, and a testament to the bond between their family and their remarkable dog. In a small, quiet town nestled between rolling hills and lush forests, there lived a dog named Max. Max was no ordinary dog. His eyes gleamed with intelligence, and his heart was as vast as the sky. He was a golden retriever, known for his loyalty and gentle nature, and he was loved by everyone who met him. But no one knew just how heroic Max could be until one fateful day. Emily, a cheerful 6-year-old with curly brown hair and sparkling blue eyes, adored Max. She would spend hours playing with him in her backyard, her laughter ringing through the air as Max chased butterflies and wagged his fluffy tail. They were inseparable, the best of friends. One sunny afternoon, Emily's mother was busy in the kitchen, baking cookies for the neighborhood picnic. Emily was playing with Max outside, her giggles echoing as they ran around the garden. But in her excitement, Emily wandered a bit too far, toward the edge of the woods that bordered her home. Suddenly, the ground gave way beneath her tiny feet. A forgotten well, covered by leaves and loose branches, had been lurking there for years. Emily screamed as she fell, her voice fading as she descended into darkness. The walls of the well were damp and slippery, and she was trapped far below the earth. Max's ears perked up, and his heart raced. He darted to the edge of the well, barking frantically. Peering down, he could see Emily's tear-streaked face far below. She was scared, her voice trembling as she called out for help. Max knew he had to act fast. Without a moment's hesitation, Max sprinted back to the house, barking with all his might. He scratched at the door, whimpering and howling, until Emily's mother rushed outside. Confused and alarmed, she followed Max as he dashed toward the woods, stopping at the well and barking fiercely. She looked down and her heart sank. Her baby was trapped. She immediately called for help, and soon the entire neighborhood gathered around. The fire department arrived, working swiftly to rescue little Emily. Max never left the edge of the well, his eyes fixed on his best friend, his tail unmoving. He whimpered softly, his heart aching as he watched her cry. After what felt like an eternity, the rescuers finally brought Emily back to the surface. She was shaken, but safe. As soon as her feet touched the ground, Max leapt toward her, licking her face as she sobbed into his golden fur. She hugged him tightly, her tiny arms wrapped around his neck, whispering, "You saved me, Max. You saved my life." Tears filled the eyes of everyone who witnessed the scene. Max had done what no human could do. He had heard Emily's cries when no one else could, and he had brought them to her when time was running out. From that day on, Max was more than just a pet. He was a hero. The townspeople celebrated him, and the local newspaper even ran his story on the front page under the headline, "Hero Dog Saves Little Girl from Tragic Fall." But for Max, the greatest reward was that Emily was safe and with him. From then on, he never left her alone, always watching over her with his devoted, loving eyes. Their bond grew stronger, a testament to the courage and love of a loyal dog who became a hero when his best friend needed him most. Because sometimes heroes come in the most unexpected forms, even with golden fur and a wagging tail.